Today, you're going to hear from a number of people on our team about some different exciting things that have happened with our platform. Kicking us off is going to be Kathleen Fitzpatrick, Interim Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies and Professor of English at MSU, Michigan State University. She is also the Project Director for Knowledge Commons. Go ahead, Kathleen, and kick us off.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really, really glad to be here. My role today is to give you a bit of background into where KCWorks came from, what went before, and what led us to the point of developing this new project. So you see the slide, which has the key points in time for this project. Knowledge Commons itself has its deep roots in 2013 and the launch of MLA Commons at the Modern Language Association. I was working there at the time, and MLA Commons was a platform for member to member communication and collaboration that was designed by the MLA to really focus on what members needed. And that initial platform included the things that we have now in terms of profiles and group discussions and the ability to build WordPress websites, but it was really focused on those things. We started thinking almost immediately that it would be really great to have this kind of social communication network for scholars tied to an interdisciplinary repository that would be able to support more formal works of scholarship for their preservation and dissemination. And so we collaborated with the Columbia University Libraries on launching CORE, which was the Commons Open Repository Exchange, was what that acronym stood for. And in 2015, we launched the pilot of CORE. And in 2016, launched Humanities Commons, which expanded beyond MLA Commons to really think about how to bring other scholarly societies and organizations into communication with the MLA, but also how to create a central space for scholars who were just anywhere, belonging to any society or at any institution, and therefore, really thinking about how to open the platform to the world with Humanities Commons. In so doing, we also opened CORE to the world so that any scholar with a Humanities Commons account could make use of the repository and could share their work with the folks throughout the network and elsewhere. In 2020, Humanities Commons moved to Michigan State University, and we received some funding that allowed us to build the team that we have today and to continue to expand into what has now become Knowledge Commons. So, Larissa, if you'll move on to the next slide. I will tell you a bit about CORE. So we originally developed it, again, with generous funding from two grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities Office of Digital Humanities. We jointly received these grants with the Columbia University Libraries Center for Digital Research and Scholarship. That entity, CDRS, is or was at the time the host of the Columbia University Libraries institutional repository. And so they had experience with working with this repository system, and we were able to learn from their experience and build on their knowledge, as well as building directly on their platform. The back end of CORE at the time was built on Fedora repository, which is very commonly used repository solution. We built out a WordPress based front end for CORE so that it would integrate fully with the social network components of first MLA Commons and then Humanities Commons. CORE provided the basic repository infrastructure that you will have come across in many places. It allowed for document deposit. As a new deposit was made, it attached a digital object identifier to it, and it provided the ability for users who were making deposits to mark up those deposits with rich metadata, allowing them to become discoverable in really important ways. And the feeds that were provided by CORE were consumed by a range of scholarly indexes and information services that got that work out into circulation in places where it could be found. So you can move on to the next slide, Larissa. Thank you. Um, we had decided, however, when the repository arrived here at MSU, that it was time for us to start thinking about our next generation repository and what that might entail. So KCWorks development really starts from this mode of thinking about what a repository could be in the future. Repositories conventionally are just sort of a filing cabinet, right? You deposit your stuff into it, and then there it is. It sits there, it's preserved. You know where to find it if you need it. But at times it can get forgotten, and it can be hard to find stuff, not knowing necessarily what repository it's in or where it's living. So we wanted to think about how a repository might become something more than just that filing cabinet. For instance, if we were to able to allow uploaded work to be versioned, right, so that it wasn't always just this final version that was uploaded and permanent forever, we might be able to turn the repository into a bit more of a workbench so that we could see projects develop over time. We also wanted to allow multiple files to be deposited together as a single project, as opposed to the situation with Core, in which one file could be a deposit at a single time. We wanted to allow the creation of collections in more robust ways, as those collections seem really important for the future of publishing. They might become new publication forms in and of themselves. And we also wanted to think about interaction with the repository, and particularly interaction between the repository and other scholarly communication platforms, and how that might enable more robust use of and discussion of the kinds of things that go into the repository. So this is the background on KCWorks and where it came from. And I am going to hand it off to my colleagues to talk to you about where we are with it.
Thanks, Kathleen. Next, we're going to hear from Ian Scott. He is the lead developer on KCWorks, and he is going to provide us with a tour of the platform and some tips for getting started. So go ahead and take us off, Ian.
All right, thanks, Larissa. Let me just find the right window to share here. Here we go. All right, so here we are on the front page of KCWorks, and I just want to give you a quick tour of the big picture of what you can find in the repository here. From the front page, you see a few things. One of them is a search box, some links to some support materials, help materials, a few of our featured collections, and recent works that have been uploaded to the repository. But if we type something into the search box here and click search or hit enter, that will take us to the search interface page. This is the main place where you explore the repository when you're looking for things on a topic or a particular author or a particular title or any basic searching. You can also get to that from the top bar here just by clicking on search, and it brings you to the same place. If you click through on any of the items, it brings you to the detail page for that item. This one apparently is a docx file, so it's not previewable. Let's see if there's one that has, yeah, here we go. So if the file format is something like a PDF or several other file formats that we can preview, you'll see a nice large preview here that you can also expand into a full screen interactive preview. You have some metadata down the side, subjects. You can generate a citation by clicking Cite This in a variety of different formats. You can download the work by clicking download, and it gives you a sense of what collections this work belongs to. That's all right there when you go to the record detail page. But then you have some other tabs. You can get more details about the record. You can get a list of the contributors with more details about their role and their institutional affiliations and link to their profile on Knowledge Commons or their ORCID profile. There's a page of analytics, and this item was just freshly uploaded, so it has no views or downloads yet, but this is where that data lives. And then if there are multiple files for a work, this tab lets you browse through all of those different files, not just the one that's previewed on the front tab. And you can download them individually or download them all as a collective zip file. Okay, so that's the basics of searching for works and viewing and interacting with individual works. The other component here is collections. And so if I click on collections, that brings me to the landing page for collections in general. And you can do a couple of things here. You can browse through any collections that you are a member of. In other words, you're one of the curators, or you have reader permission for a restricted collection. Those are listed up at the top here. You have a few of the newest collections that have been added to the repository. And then there are a few collections that are for commonses. These are the large organizations that use Knowledge Commons as their primary communication platform. You can see their collections and then collections for journals or organizations, etc. And with each of these, you can see all of the collections in those categories just by clicking See All. The other thing you can do if you are thinking about a particular collection or you want to do a search and discover more collections is just type in the search box here. And that brings you to a search page for collections. And I typed STEM, and so you can see that's giving me a whole bunch of collections that have been set up around STEM issues, and they have STEM in the collection title. If I want to look at one of those, I can click through and see the landing page for the collection. And here you'll have a little bit about the collection and a page where you can view and search all of the works that are in that collection. So this particular collection has 111 works, and I can interact with those and search them just the same way I do on the regular work search interface, but in this case, it's restricted to just this collection. If the collection has a public list of its members with their roles, that will be here as well, etc. So that gets us interacting with individual works. It gets us interacting with collections. Oh, and from the main collections page, you can also create your own collection by just clicking the new collection button. The other area that is easy to overlook at first is your own dashboard. And so over in the right-hand side of the top bar, you have a link to your own Knowledge Commons profile, but then a link to your dashboard in Knowledge Commons Works. And there are 3 tabs here. The first one lists any draft or published records that you have created. The second lists any collections that either you've created or you're a member of. You're a curator or a reader in that collection. And then there's a third tab that's your inbox for requests and messages. So if I submit a work to be considered for inclusion in a collection, that submission request will live here in my inbox, and then I can see here and get notified about responses to that request. Also, if I am invited to join the curatorial team for a collection, that invitation will show up here, and this is where I can access the back and forth discussion around that invitation too. Since often you want to be notified right away about new requests, there's a link specifically for this inbox tab in the top bar here. So you have one link that goes to your own works and another link that goes to the inbox tab where you can view your requests. So what if I want to add a work and upload something myself? I click the Add a Work button. I've recently been working on a draft that I didn't save, and so it that information was saved as I went in my browser, and the repository is asking if I want to recover that information. And if I say yes, then it will fill in the details that were unsaved from before. If I have been working on a draft and I saved it, that draft I can access through my dashboard. And so you can see here the top item is entitled My Fantastic Chapter, and that is a draft that hasn't yet been published to the repository. And if I click on it, on the title, I can view a preview of its detail page. But if I want to edit it, I can click the edit button. And that lets me recover some unsaved changes to that item. And now here I am editing an ongoing draft. And the form here is the same whether you're editing a draft or whether you're creating a brand new draft. We have divided up the different kinds of information that we gather just into chunks that are a little bit more digestible, so you don't have one massive form to fill out. And the first chunk lets you decide what kind of resource this is. And so I've selected here book section because this is an imaginary book chapter. This lets me say whether I already have a DOI for this work, a digital object identifier, or not. And if I don't, and I say no, then the system will mint one for me and register it with DataCite. I can give my title, dates, and a little abstract or description. Now, the second page is where I can give more details about the publication, language, that kind of thing about this record. And this is information that'll be crucial for things like generating a citation for people who want to cite the work. But you'll also notice that choosing the resource type here is fairly important because which resource type I choose will determine what kinds of information I'm asked for on the Details tab. So right now, I've said this work is a book section. It's a chapter. And so I'm being asked for things that are relevant to a book chapter or a book section, a book title, the pages for the section, the book publisher and place of publication, what volume the book is, maybe it's in a monograph series, that sort of thing. If I go back and I change the resource type and I say, no, this isn't a book section, this is a journal article, and I come back to the details page, now the fields have changed to things that are relevant for journal articles. I'm being asked for the journal title, volume, issue, article pages, an ISSN for the journal if I want to provide one, that sort of thing. There are a lot of different resource types that you can choose from. So we've highlighted some of the most common ones with the main buttons here, but if you click Other, then you can search a long list with everything from documentary films to preprint text documents or legal comments and everything in between, visual art. But I'm going to continue on saying this is a book section. And once I have entered the publication details and provided the language, I can provide a URL if I want. Then I can continue on to the next tab and provide information about the contributors. Now, I did already add myself as a contributor here, but let me remove myself and show you how easy it is. If you are a contributor to this work and you're uploading your own work, all you have to do is click Add Myself, and it pre-populates your information from your Knowledge Commons profile. If you have an ORCID ID on your Knowledge Commons profile, that's automatically brought in and linked here too. You can say what your role is. It defaults here to author, but you can say that you were a team lead on a research project or whatever. And it pre-populates your institutional affiliations, but you can add more if you want to, that then gets included in the information for this work. We've also added a fairly unusual, unique field here in the information about your work where you can declare how AI, generative AI, has been used in the creation of your work. This is increasingly important that we're explicit about this. And so I've said, yes, I did use some generative AI, and then it lets me describe how. I might say I used Midjourney to generate the figures for my article. If I continue on, then there's a tab, Make It Findable. And this is where I can add subject headings from the very, very large, fast subject headings vocabulary that's created by the Library of Congress. And it is sometimes a challenging vocabulary to search because it is huge and it has so many very detailed, finely grained subjects. And so sometimes you might want to limit your subject and you can say, I'm going to search topic subject terms or subject terms that have to do with events or forms or genres of communication, etc. And that can just help find the subject tags that you're looking for. And if you can't find something that you're looking for, you can type your own term in here. And so I might want to say, this is a chapter that has to do with uh, repositories. And I hit enter, and now that's added as my own free text tag. And then when people are searching the repository, those searches can include hits based on the formal subject headings or based on user-defined keywords. I can provide a content warning if I want to, if I decide there's something about the content that I want to flag to people right at the top on the detail page. And I can add information about related works of a whole variety of different kinds. Um, if this is one section of a much larger work, you can add information about that larger work here. If it's a pre-pub version of a published work that's living elsewhere, you can provide that information here and a whole lot of other relationships. Um, there's a lot of power in this field here that's not necessarily user-friendly yet. And so that's one of the many things that we're planning to work on as we move forward is to make it a little bit easier for you to recognize and add information about all kinds of different related works. But you can already work with that field yourself if you want to feel your way along. The next tab asks me whether I want to include this item in a collection. And I already, when I created the draft, chose STEM Education at State as the collection that I wanted to include this in. I can change that or I can remove that while this is still in draft form before it's been published. Because until it's published, it hasn't actually been submitted to that collection for consideration yet. While it's a draft, I'm still just indicating that I'm planning to submit it. But if I haven't provided that information yet, I can just click select a collection, and then I have a searchable list of all the collections in the repository, and I can indicate which one I want to submit my work to if I want to. This is where I can control and update the record access. And I can either say I want the whole record to be restricted, in which case it won't show up in public searches. Or I can say I don't want the whole record to be restricted, but I want the files to be inaccessible, in which case people will be able to see the detail page for your record, but they'll get a message saying that the files are only accessible on request or something like that. And if my publisher has required an embargo, I can add that embargo with the time limit and a little explanation if I want to as well. The second last tab is where I upload the files. And if I remove the files here, which I can still do because this is a draft that's not published yet, you can see what this looks like. I can upload up to 500 gigs of data per work and up to 100 files per work. So it's not infinite. You don't want to upload your astronomical data sets, but it is reasonably large. It can handle some fairly large data set files, especially for things like social science research. Um, we also list below here the kind of file types that can be previewed from the detail pages on Knowledge Commons Works. So you can upload any kind of file you want and attach it to your record. You can also add multiple files in this field and upload as many as you want up to that 100 file limit. But if you want those files to be previewable and readable right on the detail page, then you need to stick to the file types that we have so far built previewers for. And there are a variety of text file formats, image formats, video and audio formats, which can be watched and listened to right on your detail page. Structured data like JSON or CSV files and zip files. So there are quite a few different previewers and some flexibility there. We hope to expand those previewers in the future, but that gives you a sense of what will be most accessible and most useful to people when they come and visit your work. And I will just go ahead and again choose one of my old articles to upload, and that's how the upload process goes. Then I can add a license. I had already added a license here, but if I hadn't, I could either add a custom license that I described myself, or more often what you want to do is add a standard license. And we provide a database here of just about all of the common open source licenses, as well as an all rights reserved license. And you can search this list. I'm going to add the Creative Commons attribution license, and then that becomes part of the metadata for the record too. So there are a lot of steps here, but we've tried to break it down into relatively bite-sized chunks. And then the final tab is where you can save your draft or preview it or publish it either directly if you are not submitting it to a collection, or if you click publish here and you've selected a collection, at that point it gets submitted to the collection curators for their approval, their consideration. Or if you decide you want to delete this draft entirely, while it's still a draft, you can just click delete, and then it goes away and disappears from your dashboard. I'm going to click Save Draft. Oops, I left the embargo on, so I'm not going to try and go back and fix that. I'm going to go to, oh, here we go. I need to click Edit. All right, so if I come back to the Edit page and I want to preview, oh no, it still has that embargo information. We are still working on some of the bugs here, but it helps also if I keep straight what I'm adding. And now this should let me preview. Yes, here we go. Okay, so this is a preview of the detail page for my work. And you can see the AI use flag is a dismissible flag that shows up on the side here. Same thing if I add a content warning to my work. But I just want to highlight a couple of things. One is that this is highlighted as a preview until I click publish. And I can go back and forth between previewing it and editing it. If I go back here, and I'm going to remove the collection because I don't want to actually submit this. But if I go and I actually click publish, now it is published as a version of my work on the repository. And I can make changes to the metadata, but if I want to make changes to the files, then I'll need to create a new version. And I can create as many versions as I want, and those versions, there's a record of all of them. But once it's published, you'll notice that there's a button here, Manage This Work. And that's important because that's where you can come and edit the metadata by clicking edit. Or if you want to create a new version, you can just create the new version button. And if I create a new version, then where it says version 1 here on the detail page, that will list all of the different versions. And any versions that have public access, people can click through and view each version right from the detail page here. Okay, lots more that we could talk about, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of what you can do with the repository as you're getting started.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. So next we are going to go to Bonnie Russell, our product manager at Knowledge Commons. I'm going to need 30 seconds to switch over to our slides from just seeing our beautiful faces. So I will go ahead and do that, and then Bonnie will take us away.
There we go. Okay, so I do want to touch on, a little bit on collections. Collections are curated sets of deposits. Anyone can create collections. They can be created by users, groups. So when we had core deposits on groups, those have been migrated to collections. And then organizations. So Knowledge Commons has a collection, MLA has a collection, MSU has a collection of work that's been deposited in those commons. Group administrators, if you see that, there are a couple of guides in our support page, which I believe we'll link to a little bit later in this webinar, that will tell you how to go about handling those. Group admins, though, can now accept or reject submissions. One of the things that we'd had in the past was that people would deposit to core and they would add their work to a particular group. And group admins would see that and decide that that wasn't an appropriate submission, and we would have to go in and remove it. Group admins now have the ability to accept or reject submissions on their own. And so really kind of keep a curated set of deposits. OA journals, so open access journals, can also allow submissions, work with the author outside of works to refine it, although there are comments that are allowed on a work, and then publish that to the journal collection. So I'll talk about that in a second, but it gives open access journals a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more ability to kind of work with authors on these. And then users can build collections for their projects, overlay journals or courses. So if you're adding learning materials or worksheets for a class, you can actually create a collection for that class as you upload. And on the page for adding to a collection, you'll see a link that says create new collection. Next slide. I'll drop links to these in the chat when I'm done speaking, but I just wanted to highlight there are some examples. The Julia Perry Working Group, which is a group devoted to an African-American woman of color composer, who is really starting to gain more and more publicity and notoriety. Her works are being performed. I just saw one of her works performed by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra last year. And there's a group devoted to kind of delving more into her composing and also her acceptance within the classical music world. The Journal for Interdisciplinary Bible Studies is now running their open access journals on the Commons. And then the Music History, Musicology, Pedagogy Research Hub, which is devoted to kind of developing and collecting learning materials and other sorts of resources for musicology. Next slide. So now I'm going to switch hats. I am also a librarian as well as being the product manager for the Commons. And what I want to talk a little bit about is the metadata. So Ian showed you the subjects and the keywords. Metadata is essentially data about data. And good metadata includes obviously the author and contributor names, a descriptive title of your work, a clear description or abstract of what that work is, but the biggest thing you can do to help findability is adding correct subjects and keywords. Metadata for works is uploaded and aggregated by Google, Google Scholar, several other aggregators so that they're findable. Adding correct subjects and keywords give you a leg up on that findability. Most of the time, people are not going to necessarily be searching for a title or an author name. What they'll be searching for is a keyword, a subject, a discipline. So the more you add in terms of subjects and keywords, the easier it will be for people to find your work. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about something called taxonomies. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, a taxonomy is a closed list that's used for things like state names or institution names or subjects. So we have two taxonomies that we're using for subjects. And that is FAST, which is the Faceted Application of Subject Terminology, which is based on the Library of Congress subject headings. It's faceted because it's separated into things like time period, place or geographic location, and topic, among others. And so when you're searching for subjects, you may search for 19th century and then search for English literature. So it's a little bit faceted. The thing about FAST is that sometimes it's incomplete in certain areas. And one of those areas is really LGBTQIA terms and subjects. And so we've added a second taxonomy called Homosaurus. Homosaurus was developed by the LGBTQ community, and it does have a robust set of terms and subjects so that you can add those to your work if that's your field of study. We're also looking at some taxonomies that have indigenous place names and other more specific taxonomies that FAST does not capture. We can have up to 6 subject heading taxonomies, and you can actually, in the little drop down next to the search, you can search specifically. So if you want to search Homosaurus, you can do that. If you want to search by topic within FAST, you can do that as well. There is more information on how to do this in our metadata guide, which is on our support site, and we'll link that toward the end of the meeting. The other 2 taxonomies, one is the Research Organization Registry, and I love the acronym, it's ROR, and that is institutions, research organizations, et cetera. Basically, taxonomies are used for consistency. So Michigan State University will always be listed as Michigan State University, not MSU, not Michigan State. It just makes it that much easier to find things. And in version 1, so not beta, which is what we're in now, but version 1, we will also have a funders list that is powered by the Open Funder Registry, and that is a global funder registry. Next slide. So the other thing to keep in mind, and I'm going to caveat this by saying we are based in the United States. And so when I talk about copyright, I'm specifically talking about US copyright law. If you do not reside in the US, you should know the basics of the copyright law of your country. For example, Germany actually has more stringent, in some ways, copyright laws than the US does. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. 2 things in this repository. You must own the copyright and have permission from your co-authors to deposit the work. The second thing you need to think about is if you are publishing a preprint or a journal article, you need to understand the publisher's rules on preprints or on publishing the published article in an open access repository. They may require something called an embargo, which is usually 12 to 24 months to allow that journal article to kind of go through the selling period. That's something to keep in mind. And you can contact your journal editor or your publisher to make that determination. That also counts for things like book chapters. And if you're using or including other copyrighted material in your work, so if you are quoting song lyrics, if you are adding a video, if you are adding a screenshot from a film, there is something in the US called fair use. If you are using that to do literary criticism, film criticism, etc., you likely have a fair use argument. If you are using it in a fiction piece, if you're using it for decoration, like a drawing, you need to seek permission from the copyright owner to do that. There are links and a more comprehensive breakdown to all of this in our copyright permissions and licenses guide, and I highly recommend you take a look at that. There are links to things like form letters that university presses have put together and put openly on their website that you could use. Next slide. The final thing I'm going to talk about is licenses. So when Ian talked about the recommended licenses versus a custom license, we cannot tell you what kind of license or which license to put on your work. That has something that you will have to determine. Licenses describe what someone may or may not do with your work. And there are some considerations there. Personally, I tend to use what's called a CC BY international, which means that someone has to credit me as an attribution to reuse or remix my work. You may choose something like a CC BY non-commercial, which means that people can't remix or reuse your work for profit. Definitely take a look at those licenses. And if there's a pretty robust set of explanations on the Creative Commons site. For software, you would probably choose something like an MIT or an Apache license 2.0, but there are others. And again, our guide, Copyright Permissions and Licenses, has links to the sites, links to information on what those licenses mean. And so that's something that you should keep in mind as you continue to share your work. I think that's it.
Thanks, Bonnie. So I'm going to take us away for the last couple minutes of our webinar. So now that you know all about how the system works and a little bit about what licenses you can add and all this information, we know that you want to jump in and that you may have feedback for us. So KCWorks is currently in public beta. And what that means is that you can use all of the features we've described today. There just might be some little bugs that you may run into, and also that there's some other things that we're going to be launching a little bit later in the year, more in sort of mid 2025, that will add to the experience and also correct some of the issues we are already aware of. So if as you're working through the repository or perhaps in this webinar, you have some ideas about what you want to do with analytics or maybe starting a journal on the Commons, but you're not really sure that our features right now have those things, please add your feedback to the form that is linked on the top of works.hcommons.org. So when you go to our homepage and really any page on KCWorks, you'll see a banner that says we're in public beta, and that will link you to a Qualtrics form that you can fill out and add that information right there. We have also, since launching last week, had a few users that had some issues where things that were migrated from core into KCWorks were missing an author or were not quite formatted correctly. All of that feedback can also go on that form. Our team checks that form on a regular basis, and if it is something with your specific account, we will be in touch with you on how we can get it fixed. And if it's something that's just general feedback on the platform, our team is right now in the process of, as we get those things, we look at it and we talk about whether or not it's something that we will add to that version 1 release or something that we will consider in the future. So even if you don't get an immediate response after you've added something there, know that our team is definitely going through and looking at those responses to make sure we get that incorporated into the work that we're doing. So with that, you also can go to support.hcommons.org for all of our guides and FAQ that we've created on Works. We also are in the process of sort of learning how our users want to incorporate Works into their workflow, as well as sort of getting things together in that way. And so you can go to that website for our basic start of our guides and FAQ with the general questions that you have. We tried with this beta launch to cover as much of the basics of those sort of things that we knew you would ask. there. So we hope that that's a pretty robust collection to start, but know that we're going to be adding things regularly. One thing we'll be adding pretty soon is a first time uploaders checklist. So that way, if you're working with someone who has never added anything to a repository before, they have some tips of how to get started with that. And so that is the place to go to find anything about both how to use KCWorks as well as how to use Knowledge Commons in general. We also, in the coming months, as we move towards that V1 launch and beyond, we will have a lot of announcements around both what sorts of features and additions will be added to Works, as well as the community offerings that we will be holding along the way. And so, if you are not a subscriber to our newsletter, I highly recommend that you sign up. We only send out about one email a month, so we promise that we're not going to be sending you 20 emails a week that will be trying to get you onto Works. But that is our space where we tend to, as a team, communicate out updates, and we'll definitely be using that as a space to share about upcoming workshops and events as we move towards that V1 launch. We will also be talking to our community a little more about what kinds of workshops you all would like to have, if they will be focused more on things like copyright and metadata, as Bonnie presented, or more of a hands-on look at how you could create a collection or whatnot, similar to what Ian did. So stay tuned onto our social media and that newsletter, because we will be asking you for some feedback on what you want to hear us talk about. We also do sometimes have notices about outages and scheduled maintenance. We try to do those things, especially on Works at a time that is not one when many people are on the platform. But our social media platforms like Twitter, Mastodon, and LinkedIn are the places to keep your eyes peeled in case it just so happens you want to add a bunch of stuff to KCWorks and we're going to do a little bit of maintenance. So social media and newsletter are really the best places to stay in touch with us as we continue to move towards everything that is happening in this new chapter. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that concludes our sort of scripted portion of the presentation. I know we've had a few questions come into the Q&A. It looks like those have been answered. And I was just going to take a look at the chat. Thanks, Bonnie, for sharing those links. With the last couple minutes, if we'll hang out for a few here, if you have questions, feel free to type them into that Q&A portion of Zoom. We will take a look. So we'll just hang out here for 5 minutes, just in case there's anyone that has a question specifically. While people are adding in their questions, I thought that I'm going to put my team on the spot. So hopefully I'm going to try not to scare you too much, but I thought I would ask you just a general question about what are you most excited about with Works launch? I know I can speak for myself in saying I'm really excited by some of the feedback we've already received from users who want to create open access journals, and collections is a way that they're going to be able to incorporate that into their flow. So I will just do a little round robin here. So we'll start with Bonnie. What are you most excited about?
As a librarian, I'm super excited about a couple of things. One is the expanded ability to have subject taxonomies. That to me is very exciting just from a findability standpoint. The reason that we have this repository is so that people can actually have their work out there and have it be found by others who are interested in it. The second is the ability to have multiple files for deposit, because I think for someone like me, I sometimes do work in either vocabularies, or my bachelor's is in film studies. Having the ability to have a second, perhaps like a breakdown of content or a small data set is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely being able to show the connection between works is something that our previous iteration core did not allow. And it's something that we definitely have heard from users over the years of saying that they want to be able to tell that story with what they're adding. So definitely really exciting. Go ahead, Kathleen. What are you excited about?
Like Bonnie, I have two things that I am most excited about. The first came about the first time I made a test deposit to the repository before we opened up the beta to the public. Made a test deposit, included my ORCID number on it, and immediately received an email from ORCID saying, hey, there's something new that appears to be in your record. Do you want to share this publicly? So that automatic ingestion of stuff that gets deposited into Works appearing in your ORCID record is huge. The other thing that I am most excited about is that this system is underwritten by a bunch of open APIs that are going to allow us to do some real expansion of the integration possibilities for this repository with other scholarly systems. So there's a lot of amazing, amazing stuff ahead for it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also what is amazing about it's not just going to be, version one and that's it. We're not making any more changes. It will be an ongoing process as we continue to expand and incorporate more into what we're able to do. Ian, last but not least, what are you most excited about with the launch of this repository?
Yeah, on the one hand, I've been excited already to see people creating collections and the kinds of things people are creating collections for, and that people are already using this as a tool for collaboration, and that excites me a lot. And I am already moving on mentally and thinking about all the other things that we can add on and expand in order to make that collaboration even richer. And so my brain is already moving on.
Your brain is already like 10 steps down the road. That's awesome. Bonnie, I saw you raise your hand for a second. Did you have anything else to add?
I was actually trying to have a reaction, but you can't do that when you're a host. I was just going to make a little heart.
There we go. Well, so, hand hearts all around. Now we know how that works. So we haven't had any other questions, so we are going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. This was an awesome, this was an awesome experience getting to be here and talk to you all. And we look forward to seeing how you use KCWorks in the future. So everyone have a great day. Thank you. Bye.